Billionaire sees a homeless boy teaching her daughter. What she did next left everyone speechless. The morning mist hung low over the city streets as 10-year-old Marcus wrapped his thin jacket tighter around his shoulders. The cardboard beneath him was damp from the night's rain, but it was all he had to separate himself from the cold concrete of the abandoned storefront where he had spent the night. His stomach growled with a familiar emptiness that had become his constant companion these past 8 months since everything changed. Marcus carefully reached into his worn backpack and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper and a stub of pencil he had found near the elementary school yesterday. Even though his fingers were numb from the cold, he began to write, practicing the multiplication tables he had memorized by watching through classroom windows. 7 times 8 equals 56, he whispered to himself, his breath visible in the chilly morning air. 7 times 9 equals 63. Learning had become his escape from the harsh reality of his life, his way of keeping his mother's dream alive even though she was no longer here to see it. The sun was barely breaking through the gray clouds when Marcus made his way to his usual spot near Riverside Academy, one of the most prestigious private schools in the city. He had discovered a small gap in the fence months ago, hidden behind overgrown bushes where the groundskeepers never bothered to trim. From there, he could see into the outdoor study area where students sometimes worked on their assignments during breaks. Marcus never went inside the fence because he knew he did not belong there with his dirty clothes and empty stomach, but he could watch and learn from a distance. He settled into his hiding spot and pulled out his collection of discarded textbooks that he had salvaged from various dumpsters around the city. The pages were water-stained and torn, but the knowledge within them was still intact, still valuable, still his pathway to something better. As he opened a mathematics book to the chapter on fractions, he heard voices approaching the study area. A group of students emerged, their uniforms crisp and clean, their backpacks probably worth more than everything Marcus had ever owned in his life. Among the group was a girl who looked about his age, maybe 11 or 12, with long dark hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She sat down at one of the outdoor tables and spread out her homework, her face scrunched up in concentration. Marcus watched as she struggled with what appeared to be a math problem, erasing and rewriting the same equation multiple times. Her friends had wandered off to play on the nearby basketball court, leaving her alone with her frustration. After several minutes of watching her struggle, Marcus felt an overwhelming urge to help. He knew the problem she was working on because he had taught himself that same concept just last week from a discarded textbook. The solution was clear in his mind, and seeing her frustration reminded him of his own struggles when he first encountered complex fractions. Without thinking about the consequences, Marcus quietly slipped through the gap in the fence and approached the table where she sat. The girl looked up, startled to see a boy in dirty, torn clothes standing near her table. Her first instinct was to call for help, but something in Marcus's eyes made her pause. There was no threat there, only a gentle kindness and an intelligence that seemed to shine through despite his appearance. Marcus spoke softly, not wanting to scare her. "I can help you with that problem if you want." "I know it looks hard, but there's a trick to it that makes it much easier." The girl, whose name was Isabella, looked at him suspiciously at first, but desperation won over her caution. She had been struggling with this homework for almost an hour, and her tutor was sick today. "You know how to do this?" she asked, gesturing to the complex fraction problem that had been giving her such trouble. Marcus nodded and carefully sat down across from her, maintaining a respectful distance. He picked up a spare pencil from the table and began to explain the concept in simple terms, breaking down the problem into smaller, manageable steps. "See, when you have a fraction divided by another fraction, you just flip the second one and multiply instead," he explained, demonstrating on a blank piece of paper. "It's like turning a difficult mountain path into a straight road. Much easier to travel." Isabella watched in amazement as Marcus solved not just that problem, but helped her understand the entire concept. He taught with patience and clarity that even her expensive private tutors sometimes lacked. Within 20 minutes, she was solving similar problems on her own, her face lighting up with understanding and confidence. As they worked together, Isabella began to notice things about Marcus that did not match his appearance. His vocabulary was advanced, his handwriting was neat despite the dirt under his fingernails, and he referenced concepts from higher grade levels with ease. "Where do you go to school?" she asked curiously. Marcus hesitated, his eyes dropping to the table. "I don't go to school," he admitted quietly. "But I teach myself from books I find. Education is the most important thing in the world, my mother always told me that before she died." Isabella's eyes widened with a mixture of sadness and admiration. Here was someone her age who had nothing, yet he valued learning more than many of her classmates who had everything. Before she could respond, a shadow fell across the table. Both children looked up to see a woman in an elegant business suit standing there, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene before her. This was Victoria Hamilton, Isabella's mother and one of the wealthiest women in the country. She had built her fortune from nothing, creating a technology empire that spanned 3 continents. But at this moment, she was not thinking about business deals or board meetings. She was watching a homeless boy teach her daughter mathematics with more skill and patience than teachers she paid thousands of dollars. Victoria had arrived early to pick up Isabella for a doctor's appointment and had been watching from her car for the past 10 minutes. She had seen Marcus approach, had watched her daughter's initial fear transform into fascination, and had observed the entire teaching session. What struck her most was not just the boy's intelligence, but his genuine desire to help without expecting anything in return. "Isabella, who is your friend?" Victoria asked, her tone neutral but not unkind. Isabella immediately jumped to Marcus's defense. "His name is Marcus, Mom. He's been helping me with my math homework. He's really smart, probably smarter than anyone in my class." Marcus stood up quickly, preparing to run. He knew he was trespassing, and the last thing he wanted was to get in trouble with the police. But Victoria's next words stopped him. "Please don't go, Marcus. I'd like to talk to you if that's okay." There was something in her voice that made Marcus pause. It was not anger or disgust, but genuine interest and perhaps even respect. Victoria sat down at the table, her expensive suit a stark contrast to the weathered outdoor furniture. "Isabella tells me you've been helping her with mathematics. Where did you learn these concepts?" Marcus remained standing, ready to flee if necessary, but answered honestly. "From books, ma'am. I find them near schools and libraries. Sometimes stores throw away old textbooks, and I collect them. I study every night under the street lamps because they have good light." Victoria studied the boy carefully. His clothes were dirty and torn, his hair unkempt, and he was clearly malnourished. But his eyes held an intelligence and determination that she recognized. She had seen that same look in the mirror 30 years ago when she was fighting her way out of poverty. "Where are your parents, Marcus?" she asked gently. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly. "My father left before I was born. My mother died 8 months ago. She got sick, but we couldn't afford the hospital bills. They sent us away, and she died 2 days later in the shelter." His voice was steady, but Victoria could see the pain that still lived just beneath the surface. Isabella gasped, tears forming in her eyes. She could not imagine losing her mother, could not imagine being completely alone in the world. She reached out and grabbed Marcus's hand. "Mom, we have to help him. Please, we can't just leave him on the streets." Victoria was already thinking the same thing, but she needed to understand more about this remarkable boy. "Marcus, what do you want to be when you grow up?" she asked. Without hesitation, Marcus answered, "A doctor, ma'am. So I can help people like my mother who can't afford medical care. I know it seems impossible for someone like me, but I believe education can change everything. My mother taught me that knowledge is the only thing no one can take away from you." Those words hit Victoria like a lightning bolt. This boy, who had every reason to be bitter and angry at the world, still believed in the power of education and wanted to dedicate his life to helping others. She made a decision in that moment that would change multiple lives forever. Over the next hour, Victoria listened as Marcus told his story. He explained how he had been living on the streets since his mother's death, finding shelter in abandoned buildings and under bridges. He described his daily routine of searching for food in the morning, finding a safe place to study during the day, and reading under street lamps at night. He showed her his collection of salvaged textbooks, each one carefully wrapped in plastic bags to protect them from the rain. He had taught himself mathematics up to algebra, could read at a high school level, and had memorized large portions of a medical textbook he had found behind a hospital. Victoria was astounded. This child, with no formal education and no resources, had managed to educate himself to a level that surpassed many students at Isabella's expensive private school. But more than his intelligence, she was moved by his spirit. Despite everything he had endured, Marcus had not given up on his dreams or his belief in the goodness of learning. As the afternoon sun began to set, Victoria made a proposal that left both children speechless. "Marcus, I would like to offer you a home with us. Not just a place to stay, but a real home. You would be part of our family. Isabella has always wanted a sibling, and I think you two would be good for each other. You would attend Riverside Academy with Isabella, have access to all the educational resources you need, and when the time comes, I will personally ensure you get into the best medical school in the country." Marcus stared at her in disbelief. This had to be a dream. Things like this did not happen to kids like him. "But why?" he whispered. "Why would you do this for me?" Victoria smiled, and for the first time, Marcus saw the warmth beneath her businesslike exterior. "Because 30 years ago, I was you. I was a poor girl with big dreams and nothing but determination. Someone gave me a chance, and it changed my life. Now it's my turn to pay it forward. But more than that, Marcus, I see something special in you. Your intelligence is remarkable, but your character is even more impressive. Any family would be lucky to have you." Isabella was practically bouncing with excitement. "Say yes, Marcus. Please say yes. We could be brother and sister, and study together, and you could help me with math, and I could help you with other subjects. It would be amazing." Marcus felt tears streaming down his face for the first time since his mother's funeral. He had been so strong for so long, never allowing himself to hope for anything beyond surviving another day. Now, suddenly, he was being offered everything he had ever dreamed of and more. "I don't know what to say," he managed through his tears. "Just say yes," Victoria said gently, reaching out to wipe away his tears with a compassion that reminded him of his own mother. Marcus nodded, unable to speak through the emotion overwhelming him. Isabella threw her arms around him in a hug, not caring about his dirty clothes or the fact that they had just met. In that moment, she gained a brother, and Marcus gained a family. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of changes for Marcus. Victoria, true to her word, handled all the legal procedures to become his guardian. She hired the best lawyers to expedite the process, and within 2 weeks, Marcus officially became part of the Hamilton family. The first night in his new room, Marcus could not sleep. The bed was too soft after months of sleeping on cardboard and concrete. The room was too quiet without the sounds of traffic and sirens. But mostly, he was overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of his fortune. He spent hours looking at the bookshelf Victoria had filled with brand new textbooks, running his fingers along the spines as if to convince himself they were real. Isabella helped him adjust to his new life with enthusiasm and patience. She introduced him to all her friends as her brother, proudly telling everyone how he had taught her math better than any tutor. Some of the students at Riverside Academy were skeptical at first, wondering why the Hamilton family had suddenly adopted a homeless boy. But Marcus quickly proved himself in the classroom, astounding teachers with his knowledge and his eagerness to learn. The mathematics teacher, Mr. Peterson, was particularly impressed. During Marcus's first week, he solved a problem on the board that had been meant as a challenge for the advanced students. "Where did you learn this?" Mr. Peterson asked in amazement. Marcus simply replied, "From a book I found, sir." When you love learning, you find ways to learn. His response became something of a legend at the school, inspiring other students to take their education more seriously. Victoria watched Marcus flourish with a mixture of pride and satisfaction. She had given him the resources, but his success was entirely his own doing. He studied harder than any student at the school, not because he had to, but because he genuinely loved learning. He tutored other students for free, remembering what it was like to struggle without help. He volunteered at the local shelter on weekends, teaching basic literacy to other homeless children. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in Isabella. Having Marcus as a brother had transformed her from a somewhat spoiled rich girl into a compassionate, driven young woman who understood the value of what she had. 6 months after joining the Hamilton family, Marcus stood in front of the entire school to give a speech about the importance of education. Victoria and Isabella sat in the front row, beaming with pride. "Education saved my life," Marcus began, his voice clear and strong. "When I had nothing, when I was sleeping on the streets and searching for food in garbage cans, education gave me hope. It gave me purpose. Every book I found, every lesson I learned, was a step toward a better future. But I would not be standing here today if it were not for the kindness of strangers who became my family. My sister Isabella, who saw past my appearance to the person inside. My mother Victoria, who gave me a chance when the rest of the world had written me off. They taught me that true wealth is not measured in money, but in knowledge, kindness, and the willingness to help others." The auditorium erupted in applause, many people wiping away tears. Marcus's story had spread throughout the community, inspiring donations to homeless shelters and literacy programs across the city. Years passed, and Marcus never forgot where he came from. He graduated as valedictorian from Riverside Academy and received a full scholarship to medical school. Isabella, inspired by her brother's dedication to helping others, decided to become a teacher, wanting to give other children the kind of patient, caring instruction Marcus had given her that first day. On the day of Marcus's medical school graduation, Victoria stood in the audience with tears streaming down her face. The homeless boy she had found teaching her daughter mathematics was now Dr. Marcus Hamilton, ready to fulfill his dream of providing medical care to those who could not afford it. In his graduation speech, Marcus looked directly at Victoria and Isabella and said, "They say it takes a village to raise a child, but sometimes it just takes one person to believe in you. One person to see your potential when the rest of the world sees only your circumstances. To my mother Victoria and my sister Isabella, thank you for being those people for me." After graduation, Marcus established a free clinic in the poorest part of the city, not far from where he had once lived on the streets. He treated homeless patients, people without insurance, and anyone who needed medical care but could not afford it. The clinic was funded partly by Victoria's generous donations, but also by contributions from people who had been inspired by Marcus's story. Isabella often volunteered at the clinic, teaching health and literacy classes to the patients. One day, a young homeless girl was brought to the clinic, severely malnourished and ill. She reminded Marcus so much of himself at that age, scared, alone, but with an unmistakable spark of intelligence in her eyes. As he treated her, he learned that she, like him, had been teaching herself from discarded books. She wanted to be an engineer, she said, to build homes for homeless people that were warm and safe. Marcus smiled and made a phone call to Victoria. Within a month, the girl had joined the Hamilton family, becoming the third of what would eventually be 7 children that Victoria would adopt over the years. Each one was a brilliant, determined child who had been failed by the system but not by their own spirit. The Hamilton home became known as the Academy of Second Chances, a place where forgotten children could become doctors, teachers, engineers, and leaders. Marcus pioneered a program that placed educational kiosks in homeless shelters, loaded with digital textbooks and learning materials. He remembered his nights under the street lamps and wanted to give other homeless children better resources for learning. The program expanded nationwide, helping thousands of children maintain their education despite their circumstances. Isabella developed a curriculum specifically designed for children who had gaps in their formal education, making it easier for them to catch up when they returned to school. The story of Marcus and the Hamilton family became a best-selling book and eventually a movie, with all proceeds going to educational charities. But for Marcus, the greatest reward was not fame or recognition, but the knowledge that he was living his mother's dream. Every patient he treated for free, every homeless child he helped educate, was a tribute to the woman who had sacrificed everything for his education. He often visited her grave, telling her about his life, about the family he had found, about the dreams that had come true. "You were right, Mama," he would whisper. "Knowledge is the only thing no one can take away from you. And kindness, Mama. Kindness can change the world." 20 years after that first meeting at Riverside Academy, Marcus stood before the United Nations, addressing an assembly about global healthcare and education inequality. Beside him stood Victoria, now in her 70s but still sharp and passionate about changing lives. Isabella was there too, having become the Secretary of Education, implementing programs based on Marcus's story nationwide. "Every child deserves a chance," Marcus said to the assembly. "Every child deserves to learn, to dream, to become more than their circumstances. I stand here today because one woman saw a homeless boy teaching her daughter and decided to act. She did not just give me charity, she gave me dignity, family, and opportunity. If every person in this room did the same for just one child, we could change the world." The assembly rose to their feet in a standing ovation that lasted for 5 minutes. As they left the UN building, Victoria took Marcus's arm. "I'm so proud of you," she said simply. Marcus smiled and replied, "I'm proud of us, Mom. We did this together." Isabella joined them, and the three walked out into the New York sunshine, three people who had proven that love, education, and opportunity could overcome any obstacle. Behind them in the assembly hall, delegates were already making pledges to support educational programs in their countries. Inspired by the story of a homeless boy who had become a doctor, teacher, and advocate for the forgotten children of the world. The ripple effects of that day when Victoria Hamilton saw a homeless boy teaching her daughter would be felt for generations, proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change not just one life, but millions. Looking back on his journey, Marcus often thought about the moment that changed everything. It had not been finding a particularly good textbook or discovering a warm place to sleep. It had been the decision to help a struggling student, expecting nothing in return. That simple act of kindness had opened a door to a future he could never have imagined. Now, as he watched the sun set from his office at the free clinic, he saw a young boy sitting under a street lamp with a book, just as he once had. Marcus grabbed his coat and walked outside. "That's a good book," he said to the boy. "Would you like some help with it?" The boy looked up with suspicious eyes that gradually softened as Marcus sat down beside him on the cold concrete. And so the cycle continued, one act of kindness at a time, one child at a time, proving that education and compassion could indeed change the world. The title, Billionaire, sees a homeless boy teaching her daughter. What she did next left everyone speechless, had become more than just a headline. It had become a movement, a philosophy, and a reminder that every child deserves a chance to learn, to grow, and to achieve their dreams. Marcus's story proved that circumstances do not define destiny, that knowledge truly is power, and that sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you to change everything. The free clinic he established grew into a network of medical centers across the country, all operating on the principle that healthcare and education were human rights, not privileges. Medical students competed for residencies at these clinics, wanting to learn from Dr. Marcus Hamilton not just about medicine, but about compassion, dedication, and service. Victoria Hamilton passed away at the age of 85, surrounded by all 7 of her adopted children, each of whom had gone on to remarkable careers in medicine, education, technology, and public service. Her funeral was attended by thousands, including heads of state, Nobel laureates, and most importantly, hundreds of children whose lives had been changed by the Hamilton Foundation. Marcus gave the eulogy, his voice steady despite his grief. She saw potential where others saw problems. She saw family where others saw strangers. She taught us that wealth is not what you have, but what you give. And she gave everything. Isabella added, she did not just adopt us. She chose us, fought for us, and loved us with a fierceness that transformed our lives. She was proof that family is not about blood, but about love, commitment, and the choice to stand by each other no matter what. The Hamilton legacy continued through the generations. Marcus's own children grew up understanding the value of education and service. They volunteered at the clinic, tutored underprivileged students, and carried forward the belief that every person deserved a chance to reach their potential. Isabella's students often heard the story of how she met her brother, and many were inspired to look beyond appearances and circumstances to see the person within. The Riverside Academy established the Marcus Hamilton Scholarship, given each year to a brilliant student from an underprivileged background. The recipients often went on to incredible achievements, continuing the chain of transformation that had begun with a homeless boy teaching a rich girl mathematics. In his final interview before retirement, Marcus was asked what message he wanted to leave for future generations. He thought for a moment, then said, "Never underestimate the power of kindness. Never assume that someone's current situation defines their potential. Education is the great equalizer, but it needs opportunity to flourish. Be someone's opportunity. Be someone's Victoria Hamilton. You might not be a billionaire, but you can still change a life. And changing one life can change the world." He paused, then added with a smile, "And remember, sometimes the teacher you need might be wearing torn clothes and sleeping under the stars. Wisdom comes in many forms. Be humble enough to recognize it and brave enough to act on it." The interviewer asked one final question. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not helped Isabella that day?" Marcus smiled, his eyes distant with memory. "Every day. But I also know that it was not really a choice. When you have knowledge and see someone struggling, sharing that knowledge is not just an option, it's a responsibility. My mother taught me that we rise by lifting others. Isabella and Victoria did not just lift me, they taught me to fly. And that's what I have tried to do for others ever since." As he left the studio, Marcus passed a group of young medical students. One of them stopped him, eyes wide with recognition. "Dr. Hamilton. Your story inspired me to become a doctor. I grew up in foster care, and hearing about you made me believe I could do this." Marcus smiled and put his hand on the young man's shoulder. "You can do anything you set your mind to. Remember, your beginning does not determine your ending. Now, tell me about your studies." And there, in that moment, in a brief conversation between two doctors from difficult backgrounds, the spirit of Victoria Hamilton lived on. The billionaire who saw a homeless boy teaching her daughter and chose to act had created not just a family, but a legacy of compassion, education, and transformation that would ripple through generations. The title, Billionaire sees a homeless boy teaching her daughter, what she did next left everyone speechless, had become a testament to the power of human kindness and the unlimited potential that exists in every child, regardless of their circumstances. Marcus, Isabella, and Victoria had proven that with love, opportunity, and education, anything is possible. Their story continued to inspire acts of kindness around the world, reminding everyone that sometimes the most profound changes begin with the simplest acts of compassion. As the sun sets on this tale, we remember that every ending is also a beginning. Somewhere tonight, a child is studying under a street lamp. Somewhere, a person of means is making a decision that will change a life. Somewhere, knowledge is being shared freely and generously. And somewhere, the spirit of a homeless boy who became a doctor lives on in every act of kindness, every shared lesson, and every extended hand. The story that began with Billionaire sees a homeless boy teaching her daughter continues in countless ways, in countless lives, proving that the most powerful force in the world is not money or status, but the simple human desire to help one another rise.